One Detroit is on Mackinac Island for the Detroit Regional Chamber's 2023 Policy Conference. This year's theme is the power of and. Just ahead, we're going to bring you some of the important conversations from the island on how to move Michigan forward through partnerships. The special hour-long One Detroit starts right now.
From Delta faucets to Behr paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Essa Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.
We still have a couple problems, and we have one that is a ticking bomb that really does threaten everything else that we're doing, and that's our property taxes.
The greatest lessons that I learned was from working for the people who were the least successful, because I learned what not to do.
Michigan's always going to have Ford here as long as I'm alive. I love this state. I can't imagine not investing in Michigan.
Our job is to make sure that the world knows what Michigan has to offer. Our goal is to grow Michigan, and to succeed, we've got to do it together.
Policymakers, business and community leaders, and academics have come together for the Detroit Regional Chamber's Mackinac Policy Conference. Welcome to this special edition of One Detroit. I'm Stephen Henderson, a One Detroit contributor and the host of American Black Journal. We are coming to you from the Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. It is our 13th year bringing you coverage of this event, from the conference sessions to the individual conversations right here at the One Detroit desk. Coming up over the next hour, we're going to share some of the highlights from this year's event. We're going to hear from Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan on the city's progress and goals, plus Governor Gretchen Whitmer talks about growing the state's population. And then the state of the automotive industry from Ford Motor Company Executive Chairman Bill Ford. Also, an update on the Detroit Public Schools Community District from Superintendent Nikolai Vitti. Plus, diversity and equity in the workplace and the future of work in Michigan. We have all kinds of great issues coming up. Joining me now, One Detroit contributor Nolan Finley, who is editorial page editor at the Detroit News. Also with us is Zoe Clark, Michigan Radio's political director, and One Detroit's newest contributor. Zoe, welcome to the desk here on Mackinac.
Thank you. I'm the newbie. Thanks for having me.
Yes, no, it's great to have you with us. The power of and. That's the theme this week.
Glad you cleared that up, Steve. I thought it was the power of ampersand, and I was trying to get there.
It's the same thing, right? Okay. The ampersand is that powerful symbol of and. Tell me what you're seeing this week with the theme and the ideas that people are sharing at the conference.
Well, I think it's a good theme to address. I mean, we are at a point of great division in our communities and our state, and it's like very similar to what we've been trying to do with our civility project, is get people to talk past their differences. And nobody's expecting everybody to have a big hug out on the porch and set aside all their disagreements, but if we can learn to talk through them, or at least be willing to talk to each other. And, this is a place all about the conversation, and there's not a whole lot of conversation going on today in a productive way. And so, maybe this pushes us toward that.
Yeah. Zoe, you've been watching the conference really closely, but also talking with some of the people who are giving speeches. What are you seeing?
I think the theme is resonating with folks, and I think because there is a deep yearning to see some compromise. So I sort of look through it in a political lens. We say this over and over again. I know with your civility project, you talk about it, that it's the left and the right, and there's no compromise. And, we're so divided as a nation, and it feels that way. But when you individually talk to folks, I don't know about you guys, but I don't ever talk to people who are like, we love the fight.
Yeah.
We are enjoying being more divided than
dug
ever.
in, right?
We're enjoying yelling at each other. I love going on Facebook and Twitter and just like people don't want that. And so I think it's this idea of like, what can leaders of institutions, foundations, whether it be lawmakers or whomever, do to model that kind of behavior that I think most Michiganders want?
Yeah. So, Nolan, Mayor Mike Duggan in the city of Detroit has made this an annual center stage for some of his biggest ideas. This year, he's really focused on taxes, tax rates, what Detroiters pay. You've been doing some reporting on that.
Yeah, I think this is one of the bigger ideas he's brought to the island, this idea of a land value tax, where if you've got land in productive use, either with a home on it or an active business, you get a lower tax rate, a significantly lower tax rate, 25 to 30% lower than if you've let your land sit fallow or you're speculating, you've got a blighted structure on it. In that case, your taxes will go up dramatically. I think it's a good way to provide what Detroiters have long needed, particularly, the homeowners. They needed tax relief. Taxes are too high in the city. The millage rate's too high. This brings that millage rate down from, I think, somewhere around 86 to 60 or 67.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big cut. And maybe it will encourage people to take their land out of speculation and actually put it into productive use. And, there's so much vacant land. And it promises to hit some pretty important people in Detroit.
Yeah.
When you consider who's sitting on land.
Who has land and who's not doing very much with it.
And to make room for people.
Yes.
Right? Like, so it's not just, the issue of vacant land, but, we're talking so much this week about population growth, right? And getting cities back up to where we want them to be. Detroit. And, getting folks to move into the city. Well, let's make sure there's some space for all these folks that we want to come and stay.
Yeah. The population argument and discussion is really interesting. That's not just about the city of Detroit.
No.
It's also about the state of Michigan.
Yeah.
I heard something this morning about Michigan ranking 49th in population growth.
Behind only West Virginia.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, what do we do to get ourselves up off the map?
Yeah. Well, those are the people that we talk to. We're not going to do it. We're going to talk to the policymakers. Look, I mean, it's all about, I liked Santaona, the new president of the University of Michigan, said we need to make Michigan sticky, which I thought was an interesting word. Like, we need to get people who are coming for higher ed, to stay here, right? And the next workforce development. I was talking to someone earlier who's been in Michigan about, the same length as I have, born and raised, almost 4 decades, who said, ever since I was a little kid, someone asked me the population of Michigan, and we just continue to say 10 million.
Yeah.
It's not that.
It's not that.
We got to provide opportunity. I mean, when you think about who's leaving, it is the young people graduating. We lose something like 2/3 of our college graduates here. That's not sustainable.
Nope.
You have to provide them opportunity, job opportunities. You have to provide them a favorable environment to live in, healthy cities, healthy communities, and they've got to see a future for the state. And we've not done a very good job of painting a picture of where we're going and where we want to be.
So I always go back to Rick Snyder during his very first campaign for governor. And he said that he wanted to do it in 2 phases. One was that you had to do a lot of cutting and belt tightening because we were upside down financially.
Yeah.
But then he talked about an investment agenda that was going to come after that. We never really got there. The Flint water crisis derailed a lot of his administration and some of his ideas. But we still haven't turned to the things that would keep people here, that would make this a place of opportunity.
But population did grow during his tenure, and since he's left, it's gone down. And I think policies do matter.
It was going down before he left, but
it's going down. He ended his term with more people in Michigan than he began, and the current governor is not likely to unless things change. I think you've got to look at policies, and you've got to make this a attractive place for people who want to come and start a business, grow a business. It's not there yet. You got to look at our education system. Our schools are horrible.
Yeah.
And so young families are going to leave or not come.
Does the Democratic majority, Zoe, make this an easier sell in Lansing?
It's a fascinating question. It's going to be fascinating to watch. I mean, the first 6 months of seeing Democrats in charge for the first time in 40 years, right? We're seeing a lot of change and really quick. I think it'll be interesting to see what sort of policy-oriented decisions around population. We're going to hear from the governor. She's going to talk about what she'd like to see in terms of population growth. We'll see if a Democratic legislature gets behind that.
Yeah. All right, so let's start with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan's keynote address. Each year, the mayor uses the policy conference as a way to update civic and business leaders in the rest of the state on Detroit's progress, investment, and goals.
When we talk about blight to beauty, beauty is spreading across the city. So, Detroit's recovery is done, right? I can sit down, I can end the speech. Well, we still have a couple problems. And we have one that is a ticking bomb that really does threaten everything else that we're doing. And that's our property tax system. Okay? Everybody who owns a house or has a business in Detroit, you know what I'm talking about. For more than 50 years, the property tax system has two defining characteristics. Light's rewarded, building is punished. Light's rewarded, building is punished. We've done it for 50 years, and it's how we got lots of blight and not many buildings. So you want to know how far out of whack our millage is? Troy, Livonia, they're in the 50s as far as the mills they levy. Farmington, Ann Arbor in the 60s. Ferndale, Warren in the 70s. And Detroit stands alone at 86 mills. It is far more expensive to build a house and sell it in Detroit or to do any kind of business in Detroit. And here's the worst part. We tax buildings, but there's a secret. We don't tax blight. We have an exemption built into the law. And so you look at the Hudson's Motor Plant, which known as Cadillac Stamping, was in private hands since 1986 and set vacant. Why do they pay taxes and keep it vacant for all those years? Or Michigan Central, vacant for 30 years. Continental Motors, vacant for 25 years, and the owners pay the taxes. And the Packard plant been closed for 60 years. The owners owned it and paid the taxes for 55 years. And the reason is we don't tax blight. We only tax building. So we're talking about changing a tax structure that's been in place for 50 years. And that means there's going to be winners and losers. And so my first point is that what we do, we're going to give people time to adjust, even those who have been taking advantage of the system. And so what we're proposing is that whether you're getting a cut or whether you're getting an increase, we want it phased in over 3 years. You'll get a third of the cost or benefit of 25, a third in 26, a third in 27. I'm not trying to mess anybody up by flipping a switch overnight, because people have made decisions over a lot of years under the old system. But here's my plan. It's really simple. Cut taxes on buildings, 30%, triple the taxes on the land. That's it, whole thing. Cut the taxes on the buildings, 30%, triple the taxes on the land. So, how do we do it? We take out Detroit's 20 mills, we take out the state's 6 mills, take them to zero, and we replace them with 246 mill levy on the land, but nothing on the buildings. It has the effect of a 30% property tax cut on the buildings. To make up for what we lose on the buildings, we triple the tax on the lands. Sounds horrible, right? How can you triple the tax on my land? Do you know what happens when we put this into place? The guy who's paying $30 a year is paying $85 a year. I'm still spending $100 to cut his damn lot, okay? So it sounds like a lot, but it really, to me, is a reasonable number. We can give these homeowners $500 to $2,000 a year in savings. Think about that in wealth building in the city of Detroit, what that adds up to. Because most people, the generational wealth is in their homes. And we can triple the taxes on the people causing their blight. And we can build a system where good investors can succeed without celebrating with tattoos. That's my goal. And if we do it right, this land value tax can spread beauty to every corner of the city. So we're asking for your help as we hit our Lansing legislators so that 10 years from now, there's a mayor standing here who's showing you nothing but development from one end of the city to the other.
Investments in Detroit and other cities are essential to driving Michigan's revival and making it competitive with other states. In order to stand out, Michigan's got to build on its strengths to attract new residents, grow the talent base, and create inclusive communities.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when cities were taken for dead. You know, I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I saw that city decline and decay and go into the abyss. And then over the past really 20 years, cities have come back in a powerful way. And my work's been about what are the economic factors that make cities attractive? How do they attract talent? What is it about them and the kinds of talent they attract? And now most recently with the rise of remote work, it's kind of a third phase. You know, is remote work going to lead to the end of cities? I argue no. How's it going to affect cities and what's going to happen to downtown? So I just feel fortunate to be able to do this work.
What's the pitch for strong cities? If someone's, lives in a rural area and is going, oh, city life, it's not for me. What's the economic incentive?
Well, actually, one of the things Rip and I have been talking about a lot here and before here is that one of the things that's really interesting about America, but even more interesting about Michigan, is that you have a portfolio of places. There are some people, young people, empty nesters, some with families that love gritty urban environments. There are other people who like a walkable suburb. Still other people, like we're looking right out of the lake, who like to be in a lakefront community. And I think one of the interesting things about Michigan is it has something for everybody. And, we know Americans break down. There are urbanites, there are suburbanites, there are ruralites. And we're not, but the other thing that I find fascinating is sometimes people change. Sometimes you're an urbanite when you're young, and maybe you want to go to a suburb when you get older. And maybe when you're older, you lived in a suburb, you want to go back to an urban area. So I think it's not just about making cities great, it's about making all of our places the best they can be.
How does that speak to you, Rip?
Well, I think one of the fascinating parts of Richard's report that he released today is the importance of places that are authentic, historic, and have a trajectory of opportunity. And I think one of the things that all of the cities of Michigan have in different ways is those components. So Detroit has this enormous possibility of becoming an international center of mobility. Traverse City has an enormous set of opportunities around nature and environment and small downtowns. Ann Arbor.
Craft brewing.
Yeah, indeed. A little bit too much of that, probably. But Ann Arbor has the possibility of really stretching what it means to be a great urban university-serving city. On and on and on. And I think one of the things that we at Kresge have tried so hard to establish is that the building blocks from place to place to place aren't terribly different. They're good education, they're good opportunities to experience the environment, there are places where diversity and inclusion become paramount, on and on and on. And I think what the report suggests is that those things are in place, ready to go, and we're ready to take advantage of them.
Well, let's talk about the report. And I want to read the first line at the executive summary, which is, Michigan is at a historic inflection point. I mean, this is what we're talking about at this conference. It sort of feels like we have this opportunity to decide which direction we're going to go in.
Well, it's so interesting. My dad worked in a factory in Newark, New Jersey. I know a lot about manufacturing, working class kid. And for years, manufacturing our country was deindustrializing. And, although I think cars are interesting and fascinating, for a lot of people, this thing, your computer, an iPhone, these new technologies were fascinating. But what's happening in Michigan is the car is changing. It's no longer my dad's car or my car. It's a car powered by a battery, doesn't have an internal combustion engine. It is connected. It's smart. It's an app that you download. It rides on a smart road. But the interesting thing is that Michigan is probably the most well-positioned place of any place in the world. It can do a first. No other region that I know of in history, if they lost the textile industry, they had to go to a new industry. If they lost steel in Pittsburgh, where I live, they had to go to robots. Michigan could actually do a first as the car changes, become the leader in that. And what the report talks about is what it needs to do. And what's interesting, obviously it needs to develop the technology, do the electrification and the digitalization and all of that. It needs to make sure it has the talent, the kids coming out of the great universities in electrical engineering, computer engineering, chemical engineering for batteries. But what was so fascinating that wouldn't have happened 20 or 30 years ago, to do that, it needs great places. I mean, that's what's sort of interesting about it. It's not just about the technology and the talent. Those are critical. But to do that, you need to have great places that people want to be. And that's what the report talks about, how Michigan can put that all together and align it.
Business and community leaders here on the island are engaged in conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how that strengthens companies and organizations. I had the opportunity to moderate a conference session on the connection between business and equity objectives.
When you think about diversity and inclusion in context of the communities which we serve, I believe they go hand in hand. You know, one of the things that we talk about at the bank is the power of and it's about driving profits and purpose. The purpose, as you heard from our CEO yesterday, is all about the work that we do to drive responsible growth that's in a sustainable way. That includes all the work that we do, not only for our employees, but in the community. I will tell you that it is absolutely driven from the top. And so we do think we as a corporation have a role in creating economic opportunity and addressing issues around racial equity in the communities we serve, but also for our own people. And that's a lot of part about my job. When I think specifically about what that means, it means it's embedded in business reviews, meaning diversity, equity, inclusion. It's in talent reviews, it's in performance management, and we hold leaders accountable. Brian's accountable to our board. It also means that we believe in both representation and inclusion, and also the outcomes that we drive in our community. Our organization is 50% women. We are 50% people of color. We look like the world we live in, and we want to look like the world we live in at every level.
Economic opportunity and greater economic equity is, the last bastion of the civil rights movement. I was, raised with that ideal. The company is based on those ideals, and we're really proud of the fact that we provide a lot of, solid middle-class jobs with great benefits and tuition reimbursement and all these other things for our employees. I'm especially proud of the fact, as we talk about, providing equity and pathways up, that more than 40% of my management team is comprised of former hourly team members. And we're completely unionized in our Michigan facilities. And so, these things are possible when you talk about the power of and. You can be union and deliver great results. You can be union and have great labor management relations. You can perform at the highest levels in a very technical space within the industry, even though it hasn't been done in some of these areas where people haven't had access to these jobs before.
I think it's appropriate for me to maybe just call out the Chamber for having me on this panel, this being a gala presentation on Black voices, and in particular Black voices in Detroit. When it comes to voices, mine is not black. I hear one of my kids telling me, "Thank you, Captain Obvious." But I think it's really important, and if there's anything that speaks to the power of and, I believe deeply that people who look like me and have position like me need to not only be part of this conversation, but to be held accountable for the outcomes. And I implore those of you who are not invested in this conversation to become invested in this conversation, because it's not only important for Detroit, it's important for the region, it's important for the country, so we all have a stake. And getting back to the question about how business and this important issue intersects, Kelly is a big company. We have thousands of employees. We operate in almost every state in the country. We work with for-profit companies, not-for-profit companies, governments. We're the largest provider of substitute teachers in the U.S. So we have broad exposure. And I can tell you unequivocally that the best performing companies that we deal with, more than 10,000, are those that have embraced the idea that opening up opportunity for more people is good business.
One Detroit's ongoing Future of Work initiative follows the changing trends in the workplace and the workforce. One Detroit contributor Zoe Clark spoke with some of the state's leading innovators about the revolution of Michigan industries.
Do we have the proper workforce in Michigan right now for these jobs of the future that we've been talking about this week?
We have the right people, but we don't have the right workforce. So There's so much training available, so much that needs to be done, but these are jobs, the jobs of today are jobs of the future. So people have not been trained to maintain EV charging stations, install EV charging stations. There are not enough energy auditors. Our Next Energy is doing battery cell manufacturing. Where are the experienced battery cell manufacturers? There are none because the industries are so new. So we are on the precipice of creating the right workforce with the right people here in Michigan.
So what is it going to take to do that?
It's going to take a lot of good training to be scaled and elevated. One of the most exciting things for me is that there are groups of people training, but they're training 10s and 20s and 100s. And we need hundreds and thousands in some cases to be trained in order to serve the needs of the clean energy industry.
Lisa, you testified at a House committee 2 years ago about labor shortages.
Yeah.
2 years ago. 2 years later, is the message the same?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much the same. And so we're still working with it, working through it, the best we can. And I think, because it's not the power of and, right? It's all of us. And so when we talk about, that's my competitive advantage. I've heard certain people say, hiring people, being able to train up the workforce, that's my competitive advantage. No, it's not. It's all of us. We all have to come together and set up these types of training programs that gives everyone a pool of resources, because not everybody that I train necessarily wants to work for me, but maybe they want to work for Carla, maybe they want to work for DTE, and the folks coming from DTE, I can certainly use them, but there's a commonality, there's a common footprint that we all need to start with. Maybe it's the math skills and we bring the math up. We're talking about technology. What does technology really look like? When we talk about it, everybody talks about software coding. It's not just software coding. We have technology in everything that we touch. When I look at the automobile, I look at it like an iPhone. It is what Steve Jobs said. I didn't create the phone, right? I created the playground that everybody wants to be on. So now we have energy coming into it, energy in a different way. We're looking at wireless, we're looking at the charging. The thing I'm excited about is looking forward and saying, how can my car talk to the next car? And having all these different elements that come together to make that happen.
Because it's going to.
It's going to. It's upon us, right?
Yeah.
Everybody says it's here. Whether I like it or not, it's here. I just love the smell of exhaust in the morning, so I'm sorry.
There's not much of that, though, on Mackinac Island.
No.
The smell of horses in the morning.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah.
Not the same.
No, it's not.
Trevor, one of the sessions this week is, are industry and consumers prepared for the electric revolution?
Well, it's coming, so I think industry has to be prepared. And I want to go back to your first questions around workforce, right? So what Lisa was talking about is we have to have a growth mindset. We have to all think about how we get this workforce ready together, because it's going to be a strategic advantage for Michigan and all of the companies in Michigan. Our ecostructure, our ecosystem will all benefit as we work on this together. So we got to work on workforce together and make sure that we're all benefiting from that. And then when I think about the grid, we spend a lot of time talking about, is our grid ready for electrification? The good thing is it's not all coming at once. And what we see is the majority of people that are charging their cars today, 82% in our service territory, do it in their own homes. But then it goes into, well, how do you make sure that charging and electric vehicle electrification is equitable across the whole service territory? I think that's where we need to work with partners like these two to make sure that, how do you put charging into the low-income communities or the rental communities to make sure that they also have access to electric vehicles?
Well, and this goes to this question about, is it equitable, right? Is this electric future equitable? So what kind of work needs to be done? You're talking about it and thinking about it.
Yeah.
What are those next steps?
So at DTE, we will file what we call a transportation electrification plan, and we're doing a lot of stakeholder analysis with everybody right now, trying to figure out what's the right place for DTE to play in that. Look, for people that want to install chargers, if you install private chargers in somebody's home, well, there's a market for that, and there's a reason companies do that, because they see profit in doing that. There's other segments of that market, installing chargers in the public areas for people to charge, low-income areas, rental areas, Right now, that's not a profitable market. So what we're trying to figure out at DTE is where should we play, where should we partner, and what's that look like for the whole ecosystem so we move vehicle charging forward.
When we talk about the future of work, Michigan's success is going to depend on growing our population and making the state an attractive place to do business. Governor Gretchen Whitmer addressed the state's population growth along with other important objectives in her keynote speech.
Our goal is to grow Michigan, and to succeed, we've got to do it together. We're making progress, but we've got to do more. It is time for a growth strategy led by leaders and experts, focused on our collective goals rather than personal, political, or partisan agendas. Yesterday, we laid out Make It in Michigan, which is our plan to win more projects and invest in people and revitalize places. Growing our state and economy requires progress on all three of these fronts. This morning, I signed an executive order establishing the Growing Michigan Together Council. This new council, which is co-chaired by Ambassador John Ricolta Jr., a Republican, and Shirley Stancato, a Democrat, will bring leaders in industry, education, and government together to focus on growing Michigan's population in a smart, strategic way. So let's talk a little bit about the council's directives. First, jobs, talent, and people. The council will identify a specific population goal for 2050. They will map out how to use all the different levers that we have: retention, recruitment, domestic migration, immigration, so that we can continue growing our economy and create upward mobility for everyone. They'll focus on how to build, attract, and retain a skilled workforce that can compete with other states and nations. We know talent drives growth, and we must create equitable paths to opportunity so Michiganders can get the good-paying jobs created by the cutting-edge companies we're competing to bring home. Next, infrastructure and places. We have made record investments in every kind of infrastructure, but we still have a lot of good work to do, especially if we have an increasing population. So the council will develop long-term funding solutions for transportation and water infrastructure so we can increase capacity and keep costs low. And finally, education. We must improve student outcomes at every level, from preschool through post-secondary. The council will develop policies and sustainable funding recommendations to improve education so that every child realizes their full potential. And it will propose how to measure our performance against other top states. The ultimate goal of any policy or plan, however, is its impact on people. We want to ensure everyone can build their future here in Michigan. In addition to this work, we need personnel embedded within state government, focused full-time on the mission to grow this state. And that's why I'm excited to announce that Hillary Doe will be Michigan's first Chief Growth Officer. So as Chief Growth Officer, Hillary will be housed within the MEDC. She'll work closely with the council to implement recommendations, chase funding, and bring stakeholders together. She'll lead a first-in-the-nation effort to tell Michigan's story of natural beauty, diversity, economic leadership. I'm excited for all of you to get to know and to work with Hillary and the council.
Michigan's University Research Corridor plays a key role in attracting business and talent and creating a vibrant economy. The collaboration between Wayne State University, Michigan State University, and the University of Michigan positions Michigan as a leader in research and innovation.
President Ono and I are really working together to reverse course and make sure that that diaspora of people who have left the state for other reasons and perhaps other opportunities really see this as the place of opportunity for them and their families. And that's an important equation that both their work and their life has to commingle in order for them to be comfortable in the state of Michigan. And we're working together with the MEDC and with the governor's office to really make sure that our universities as well as the ecosystem really is that warm, welcoming environment for everyone.
Yeah. Well, and I want to talk exactly about the work that both of you can do. So give me an example of what Michigan State University is doing right now as we talk about workforce development.
One of the things we're doing is developing a new engineering and digital innovation center, and this is to really invert the way we think about colleges. It's not a college of engineering. It is six colleges coming together for students who are interested in engineering, but also in digital innovation and in the new economy that's coming that they themselves will both participate in and will build. And so this new center allows us to teach in new and innovative ways and to do a new kind of research that asks questions that are orthogonal to the way we've thought in the past.
Yeah. President Ono, I feel like every day I am hearing about some new initiative from the University of Michigan, whether it's EVs, whether it's startup. Tell me what the U is doing right now in terms of workforce development.
Well, it's a huge amount of work. Thanks a lot for the shout out about the electric vehicles.
Yeah.
But we just launched a $55 million quantum research institute.
Yeah.
And we're very excited about that and the role that's going to play moving forward. As you know, we have just launched a global superconductor facility, which is really global in nature. Yeah. And we're partnering with the other universities in the URC, with Michigan State University and Wayne State University, but also Washtenaw Community College, in really positioning Michigan to be hopefully a recipient of funding from the Chips for Science Act.
Yeah. So. Well, and that's been this fascinating conversation, and President Ono, I know we'll also talk a little later about sort of workforce and talent development, but the theme seems to be, aside from the power of and, which we're going to get to, but also the need for institutions to work together. And so you said the URC, for folks who may be new to the state, or it's the University Research Corridor. Teresa Woodruff, tell me a little bit about what work is going on right now with the URC that you're excited about.
This has been a 10-year partnership, and right now I think the partnership has never been stronger. And as President Ono just said, we're working together as R1 universities, as well as with community colleges. And to me, that's the power of and that is going to allow us to take students who are interested in coming in from any corridor, whether directly to a 4-year or through the 2 years. Yeah. And I think one of the things that we're doing is developing this workforce positioning for EVs themselves. And that's going to allow all of us to have more opportunities for those students who graduate from this top-ranked cluster of universities that really outpaces by student numbers and by research dollars any other cluster in America.
Yeah. President Ono?
Yeah, I mean, we start off with the top 10 issue.
Yeah.
As Teresa said, we are number one in terms of the talent that we produce.
Yes.
And the $2.7 billion in research is staggering. And people don't know that. It's really a great news story, but also is going to be the seed corn for future innovation and really fueling startup companies that are coming out of our companies and also attracting new industries to Michigan.
Preparing K-12 students for success in higher ed is the first step toward producing a skilled workforce for the future. The Detroit Public Schools Community District is focusing on the budget, student enrollment, and meeting long-term academic goals as it continues to recover from the pandemic.
Everything was a challenge in the pandemic, from staffing to online learning to student attendance.
Yeah.
So, the work we had to shift to try to meet the needs of our families, our students, and our staff.
Yeah.
And we've done that. So, what gets me up every day is the opportunity to give our students what they deserve, which is an outstanding public school quality education.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like we were able to do that because of the challenges of the pandemic. And now we're starting to turn a corner. We had to balance our budget next year without COVID funding.
Yeah.
The reality of losing 2,000 students.
Yeah.
But, I think the positive is that DPS in the past really had difficulties doing these kind of things.
Yeah.
And now we're able to do this. We've had some challenges and some tensions in the school district, but our budget is balanced going into next year. I feel like we have not undermined our commitment to student achievement. We've protected the classroom. We're not laying off teachers. We're not cutting art and music programs. We're refining some things, refining some personnel positions, but we're moving into next year, I think, with the intentionality to continue to raise student achievement and build on the kind of academic success we had before the pandemic.
What do students need the most right now in Detroit, in the district?
One thing they need is stability and consistency. And I think as superintendent and as a school board, I think we've done that. Yeah. And when you have consistency in superintendent and school board leadership, you have consistency with central office staff, you have consistency with your principals, and that trickles down to your teachers.
I was going to say.
And, we've been nearly fully staffed now for the last 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And that means consistency for children in the classroom.
Yeah.
And so that's when I talk about our district being normal.
Yeah.
That's what that means, is that you can go to school every year and anticipate to see the same teacher, the same principal. There will always be changes here and there, but for the most part, it's consistency that I think our students need, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah.
We can talk about more mental health support, having nurses in schools, and all that's important, but it's the relationship between the students and the personnel that they work with every day. And that has certainly been improved over the years and will continue to improve.
And so how is teacher retention? I know you're getting ready to end this year, start a new one. Are you going to have enough teachers in the classrooms to do the work that these students need?
Absolutely. And I feel that has been a definitive sign of progress and improvement. When we started 6 years ago, we had 400 teacher vacancies and no plan to recruit and retain teachers.
Yeah.
And so now, the past really 2 years, we've had fully staffed with teachers. We've put money in a budget to increase salaries again next year. The average teacher salary is improved by $15,000. We're going to make another investment next year. And so I'm not concerned that we're going to be fully staffed come fall.
Yeah.
There might be a couple of schools that have 1 or 2 vacancies, but knowing that we hire 3,000 teachers in 100 schools, that's definitive progress, and I think that's competitive with any suburban school district in Michigan.
The Mackinac Policy Conference is known for bringing in some really notable speakers. Former U.S. Representative Liz Cheney was a special guest this year, and CNN host and Washington Post columnist Fareed Zakaria was a keynote speaker. Ford Motor Company Executive Chairman Bill Ford talked about the automotive industry, and Mark Cuban, an entrepreneur and owner of the Dallas Mavericks, sat down for a conversation on the main stage.
The greatest lessons that I learned was from working for the people who were the least successful, because I learned what not to do. Michael Humecki was more concerned about, I remember, look, I wore a suit to work, but the suits I bought were 2 for $99, polyester. You can wipe them down, they stood up on their own. And literally the first suit shirt I had, the first shirt I wore with a suit, I bought used. First 10, I bought used. The first ties I had, I bought used. The first shoes I had, I bought used. And he was always talking to me about the best place to buy nice glasses or nice suits, and he would never go out and sell. And it really, really hammered home that for any business, anywhere, anyhow, there's never been a business that succeeded without sales. And as an entrepreneur, the number one thing that you can do is sell. Because if you don't love your product enough to go out there and tell every single person on the planet what you do and what you sell and how you can help them, then why are you in the business? Why are you doing what you do? And I also learned very quickly that selling isn't convincing. It's not like, oh, let me convince this person. No, selling is helping. Putting yourself in the shoes of the person that you're selling to and figuring out how you can make their lives better, how you can reduce their stress. Across any business on the planet, if you can figure out how to reduce people's stress and they understand it and they're willing to pay you for that, you're going to make money and you're going to do well.
Our theme this week, you heard Matt and Sandy a little bit talking about the power of and coming together. You've seen, as we mentioned, a ton of businesses. I'm sure some with good culture, some with bad. When you think about the power of and, how important is that when you're trying to operate, when you're trying to scale?
Incredibly important. So I think what a lot of people, we're going right now through a lot of discussions about woke businesses and not woke businesses and DEI and what's right and what's wrong. I'm just going to tell you what I think. Everybody gets their own opinion. You get to think what you want. I think your business needs to match the demographics of your prospects and your customers. that whoever you're selling to, you will connect better if the people that work for you look like the people that can buy from you. And when you have those people who look like the people you're trying to sell to, they tend to understand them more, right? They tend to have a better connection. And that allows them to sell. So when you talk about the power of and, you have to look at the people you're selling to and ask, who else can I add? What's the and? Who else can I work with? What organizations? What people? Because everybody in this country, the demographics change and they're continuing to change, but that's where the money is. That's where the opportunity is. And going into communities that don't have investment, don't have people that typically focus there, that's where the biggest opportunities are because no one's looking there. Why do you want to be the 10,001 person doing the same thing when you can go someplace where nobody else is looking, and that's where the greatest opportunities are? And so, to me, call me woke, but you don't need to call it DEI. You can call it whatever you want. I call it good business, right? When you're looking like how your prospects look, because that's the only way you're going to understand. And to me, seeing the ampersand everywhere, the and, that's what it means. It means taking the people that you're selling to and making sure your workforce looks like them and making sure you reflect their values and being able to connect to them. That's what works for me and always has.
Let's talk about moving into EVs, and there are people that are driving them now who love them very much. But to move to that point where we are going to be fully electric and taking a look at the price, infrastructure, and people are not quite sure.
Yeah, and they're not. And the great thing about us is we've sort of positioned our company that we can go whichever way it breaks. So we have an amazing collection of internal combustion products that I'm very proud of, whether it's Bronco or Bronco Sport or F-150 or Explorer. I mean, and you can go down the list, Mustang. Those are great internal combustion vehicles. They're going to be around a long time. If adoption happens more quickly, we're going fast down that road too. So, I believe that optionality for us is the way to go because one size doesn't fit all. Some people, really do want EVs. Other people are saying, over my dead body, I'll never drive one of those things. That's fine. I mean, nobody's forcing anybody into anything. And yet we are placing our bets that the EV future will come.
Let's go ahead and take a look at Michigan and finding the talent that's here and the deliberate placemaking and deliberate decision about when you grow and when you're picking a plant and where you want to be. What are some of the considerations that I think Michigan needed to take into consideration to be able to have more of Ford here?
Well, Michigan's always going to have Ford here as long as I'm alive. I love this state. I can't imagine not investing in Michigan. But and one of the yes. And we've invested billions over the last few years in Michigan, and will continue to do so. And one of the great things we have here are our universities. Our universities in Michigan are fantastic. And there's a lot of talent coming out of those universities. But the problem was, in the past, a lot of those graduates would move to Chicago, or we lost them. But we now can offer those kinds of jobs, software and hardware, but particularly working on future problems that young people find really compelling. So we're doing a lot of hiring in Michigan, and as I say, our pipeline here is really good.
So let's bring back Nolan Finley and Zoe Clark to talk about where things go from here after everyone leaves the island. What are some next steps that make sense?
Well, now this is a policy conference. It's a business conference.
Yes.
And policy in Michigan over the last 5-6 months has not been going in business's direction. They've been pushing a very pro-union agenda, 19 pro-union pieces of legislation introduced in the House just a couple of weeks ago. Not good for business, or not good from business's perspective. And they're going to have to leave here and start figuring out how they react to that, how they push back, because they are adopting the policies of states that aren't growing. You look at what's happening nationally, states with pro-union legislatures and governors are not the ones that are growing. If Michigan's going to grow, they've got to find a balance, and
So,
we're nowhere near
Nolan,
balance.
it's the power of and. You are saying
They're
or.
Now we're going to have to find a balance because there's no or going on.
You don't feel
now.
like there's any or coming
There's
out of
no
the
or
legislature
going
right
on
now?
it's there's not much bipartisan legislating going on, and business doesn't have much of a voice.
So Zoe, this idea of union legislation, pro-worker legislation is what a lot of people would call it. The growth that comes from that goes into people's pockets. Is that right? Am I wrong here?
That is one side of the argument. The other thing I might say is it's an interesting dynamic where, Nolan, you're talking absolutely about right to work and changes to prevailing wage. Again, this was the legislation I was talking about earlier in this hour. What's interesting, though, is the governor is trying to sort of thread this needle. I mean, let's remember, too, in her first State of the State of her second term, so just this past January, it's sort of the headline that really came away was bigotry is bad for business.
Yes.
So, again, we're talking so much about sort of culture wars and things like that, but she seems to be digging into this idea of, okay, we may be doing these more progressive things when it comes to the economy, but she's sort of making an argument that the cultural changes that she's pushing along with the legislature, she believes is going to help grow the economy because it's going to get people to go, hey, Michigan seems to be a more inclusive state than X, Y, and Z. It's an interesting, again, way to thread the needle. Bigotry is bad for business.
Yeah, I mean, amending Elliott Larson to include LGBTQ folks.
Those aren't the kind of things.
That's not where you're.
No, those aren't the kind of things business are talking about up here. They're talking about the pieces of legislation that sort of roll back accountability for schools without replacing them. They're talking about legislation, for example, a piece of legislation introduced a couple of weeks ago that would force companies to reveal their payrolls if the union requested it. Those are not pro-business measures, and it's sending a bad message. You can like it or not like it. The reality is business seeks a friendly environment, and we're not moving toward a business-friendly environment here.
How worried do you think Joe Tate, who is the Speaker of the House, or Winnie Brinks, who is the Senate Majority Leader, are about the things that they're doing and the message that it sends to business, and how worried is the governor?
Well, I mean, it would be silly to say it's not a political issue. I mean, let's remember when the Democrats, was it when after election in November, when we realized for the first time in 40 years, what was the first thing all of us were asking each other? When do they do right to work? Right? And there was a lot of theories they do it early on, right? And just kind of pull the Band-Aid off, or are they going to wait a little and try to get some bipartisan compromise first? So, I mean, this is the negotiation in Lansing that they're trying to figure out. And it's going to be, again, as I said earlier, it's going to be interesting to see now the first 6 months are over. Once they get the budget done, where are they turning to next? And we have, new economic figures out from CREC, which is where the Senate Fiscal Agency and the House Fiscal Agency come out and say, here's how much money you've got to spend. It's what we're all going to be watching.
Yeah. Ultimately, this is about voters, though, and what they think is going right or wrong, not just in the legislature or the governor's mansion, but in their pocketbooks.
Right.
And why isn't siding with workers going to help them?
Well, if business, we've seen what happens in this state when business leaves. I mean, we've been through that. We've had these policies in place before, and they led to the lost decade. It's not good for anybody's pocketbook if business doesn't grow and if jobs aren't created. And, I'm afraid that's exactly where we're pushing toward in Michigan, because they've moved at such speed without considering the consequences of the legislation beyond whether their union supporters are happy.
Are there things that you think they should be doing instead of not doing the things that they're doing? Are there proactive things you think they need to be doing for business as well?
Absolutely. I think the things Duggan are doing in terms of tax reform, I think there's still a lot to be done in the regulatory realm to send this message that this is a good place to invest. You'll get a return here. And when a state's not growing population, it doesn't send that signal.
How accurate is that? How much are voters going to care about that rather than the money that they're going to have from better jobs and better wages?
This is the question. It is. I mean, one of the things that I'm going to be really interested is, this is the first time, I know I keep saying it, but this is the first time where Democrats have been in charge ever in all the chambers and the executive management with a Mackinac Policy Conference.
That's true.
So let's see what happens. I mean, am I going to say one conference, 3 days is going to dynamically change Lansing? Absolutely not. But after some of these sit downs and conversations, could we see a different dynamic? I don't know. This is what we're going to have to watch.
Yeah. Well, this is always the test for the chamber too.
Yes.
How much does this conference matter? How much does what happens up here translate into things that actually get
like
done?
the Gordie Howe Bridge, like
Yeah,
the Grand Bargain. I
absolutely.
mean, there's some instances.
Some stuff that's always gotten done.
Yeah.
Zoe, Nolan.
Hey, thank you.
Great conference with the two of you again. Thanks for being here on One Detroit. So that's going to do it for us here at the 2023 Mackinac Policy Conference. You can see the sessions and the interviews on demand at onedetroitpbs.org. We want to thank our partners at the Detroit Regional Chamber for again hosting this important gathering of decision makers. And Detroit Public Television is proud to bring this conference to residents all throughout Michigan. Stay with One Detroit for in-depth coverage of the issues that matter to you. For all of us at Detroit Public Television, I'm Stephen Henderson. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929. Support for this program is provided by the Cynthia and Edsel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV, the Kresge Foundation.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you.